Hey everyone, welcome back to yet another live stream. It's Tuesday, so you know it's live stream time. And today we have some very exciting things to be talking about. The last couple of live streams have been very Scrum, very Agile based. And since this is a channel a lot about Jira, I thought it'd be a good idea to maybe start talking about Jira administration. So if you've ever wanted to be a Jira admin, or if you were curious on what kind of skills, what kind of things do you need to know as a Jira admin, this is going to be a very cool, very easy to understand beginners type of course for you. But before we get too started, if you want to drop a hello in the chat, if you have any questions, comments, concerns during the stream, feel free to drop some questions in the chat. And or if you're watching the playback, make sure you use the comment section to basically let me know if you have any questions throughout this chat. I'm going to try not to, it's obviously going to be a very technical discussion today. I'm going to try not to make it too technical. And we're not going to be able to cover everything, but I at least want to give you a sense of understanding of what it is to be a Jira administrator, some of the things, some of the common tasks that I typically do because I am a Jira administrator. I am in Jira pretty much every day, almost every day. And so I've learned a couple of things from just being in the tool. And I wanted to make sure that you're aware and that you learn the different things that you should be knowing if you've been thinking, considering, pondering about starting a career in Jira administration. So with that said, thank you again to everybody that's tuning in. If you're watching the replay, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you're watching the replay here and you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel out tremendously. Some 70% of my audience members aren't subscribed, so it'd be great for you to smash that subscribe button and help the channel out. With that said, we're just going to jump into Jira and we're going to go through this list. I think I have more than an hour's worth of content. And so, depending on the engagement, depending on how many people jump in, the type of questions that I get, we're going to go for about an hour. I'll see if I can find a good stopping point. Might go a little bit over. And then we may, depending on just the interaction here, may have to go into a part 2 at a later date. So, hope you are ready to learn. I am going to be covering a lot of good stuff here. So, let's jump into, again, just the very basic beginners. If you are looking to maybe become a Jira administrator, what are some of the things you need to know? And so we'll just cover some of the basics and hopefully give you the tools that you need to make some better, wiser decisions and help you determine if this is the right type of career for you. All right, so I'm in Jira here, and this is just a typical landing page. But today's focus is really going to be on the administrative side. So before we get too far, I do want to make a really big disclaimer. Everything that we're going to be talking about today is with respect to Jira Cloud. So that's one thing you should be aware of. This is one thing that it's obviously a really big caveat because it's the cloud, and so the interface and the things that you're going to do here are going to be different than if you were a Jira admin on like the on-premise versions of Jira. Now, with that said, most, if not everything, should apply. There's just obviously things are going to be slightly different places. There might be a couple of things here and there that just don't apply, but for the most part, I would say there's like a 95% overlap between being an admin of Jira for the cloud versus the data center. You should be able to interchange between the two fairly easily. So anyways, so in Jira here, you're going to want to be a site administrator. And the easiest way to know if you have the right permissions is if you click on this little gear in the top right corner, you should see the Atlassian admin, and then you should see all the Jira settings. So if you can see all of this, then we're good. You're good to basically proceed. And what I'm going to do is, for the purpose of this training, we're just going to kind of work our way down this list. I'm going to walk you through some of the common tasks, what you do in each of these sections, in these segments, so that you can study, so that you can practice, and hopefully get better yourself. And so the first one we're going to start off is with user management. Now, my interface is going to look a little bit different because I'm on a completely not completely free, but it's just a team of me, and I'm not at the enterprise level here. But the similar concept should apply. You should have pretty much the same look and feel. It's going to be a little slightly different, but it should overall be very close to what you're going to experience or see in your Jira. Now, the first thing I want you to note is you should notice that we've actually left Jira. This is very, very different because when you're managing users in the server or data center version, you're actually within Jira. So here in the cloud, we actually leave and we go to admin.atlassian.com to do all the management. Now, because Atlassian is super awesome, by the time you look at this training a few weeks from now, a few months from now, this whole thing might change because Atlassian is always making changes to the UI. They're trying to streamline things and try to make things easier. So the things in here should all apply in long term, but just know that some things might have shifted, some items might have moved to a different menu option. And so I'm just gonna cover some of the core basics, and then things that are things I'm gonna cover things that I basically always do, right? So Atlassian is probably most likely not gonna remove those or remove those functionalities. So I won't talk about some of the outliers that I typically don't do because then again you have a better chance of just making sure you're doing common tasks. So right out of the gate, the very first thing that I'm doing as a Jira admin is I'm managing users, right? And so you have a couple of ways to manage users. If you're a smaller team, if you're a smaller organization, you're probably just going to invite users using this button. And when you invite users here, you just put in their email. This could be an internal email. This can be pretty much any email. And it will basically send an email out to this user. Now, what makes things unique in the cloud is that this user or this email that the user is using, it becomes their Atlassian ID. And unlike the data center or the server version or on-premise, I'll just call it on-premise. Unlike the on-premise version, you actually can't manage your user's personal profile all that much. In the data center, you can, or on-premise, I got to stick to one word here. In the on-premise version, you can actually do a lot of like configurations and management of the user. You can set passwords and change the names and things like that. But in the cloud, when you hit this email and send this invite, it's going to go out to the user. If the user has never logged into Jira, they're going to be prompted to basically create or sign up for an Atlassian ID using that email, and then they're going to be able to access the account. So just kind of know that this is very, very important that you get the right email because every person's email is unique. So it does become a unique user, and you can't change the emails very, very easily. In fact, I would even go as far as saying you probably can't even change the email. So every time that you have a new user, that maybe you're merging companies and your emails are changing, those are going to be basically new users. And so Jira is going to treat you as a completely different individual. And so you want to be very careful with, again, who and how you're inviting these users. Down below, you're going to select the product access. So this part is actually kind of critical because these items here are going to directly impact your licensing. So you do have the ability to invite a user to one product, but not the other. And so if you don't want to consume too many licenses, if you just want to make sure you buy the right amount of licenses, make sure you only invite the users to the products that they're actually going to use. And then over here, you'll assign them to a specific role. We're going to cover roles in a second, but just know that this is where you would basically pick whether they're a user, developer, and then if they're administrator, you would put them over here for product administration. Confluence has the administration built in. For some reason, it's kind of a weird UI here, but you essentially just pick a user, and then optionally, you're going to put them into groups. I'm going to talk about benefits of a groups in a second as well, but you may want to add these specific users into a group, and then you can personalize the email. You don't have to do this. I've never do it, and then just hit this invite. They're going to get an invite saying, hello, you've been invited. Click on this link, and it's going to redirect them to the Jira instance. So that's how we add users. But once you have some users, one of the things that you want to do here is you want to check for your active users. So a common problem that I see in this scenario is, and especially a common task that you have as a Jira admin is, you want to lower your bill count as much as possible. So you are paid, and the prices are going up October 18th for the cloud, right? But you're paying some $7, $8 for standard and some $14, $15 for premium. And so if you have users that haven't logged in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, it's really imperative that you go through this list. Obviously, your list is going to be a lot bigger. Mine's just me, right? But if in your team, you're going to have a long list, and keep an eye out for this last active. If a user isn't active, a common Jira task is to come in to that specific individual and essentially remove their product access. And once you remove their product access, if I were to just remove this completely, then they wouldn't be able to access that product anymore. And thus, they're not going to consume a license. Now, I don't recommend that you remove the user. And when you remove the users in Jira, they basically are gone, like they're poofed out of existence, and you don't always want to do that. So what you can do is you can just remove their product accesses, but they will still exist as a user. And that means that you can still search for the items that were assigned to them. It's just going to say inactive in their next to their name. Versus if you delete them, it'll just be like unknown user or something like that. And that just causes a little bit more confusion. So my recommendation is when you're doing the cleanup, which is again a very common Jira administrative task, you want to make sure you just remove the product access and leave the user still there. But if you absolutely have to, like maybe it's a disgruntled employee that got fired or something of that nature, I recommend you go the whole 9 yards and you basically remove the user. I won't be able to remove myself because obviously it's just me, right? But if you remove that user, they'll be poofed out of your Jira, and that's gonna take care of that. The other thing that you are probably doing with management of users is you're going to be adding them to groups. So you saw that when I invited a user to Jira, I can have the option to add them to a group, but you might not always have that insight. You might not always know which group they need to be in. So another common Jira task that I'm doing as a Jira administrator is I'm coming into my user and then I'm adding them to a group. And so then from here, I can add them to pretty much whatever group I need to add them to. And then I can click add groups and that's it. So that's like from a user management perspective, that's probably one of the 2, 3 more common things, right? I'm inviting users, I'm cleaning up the user list, or I'm adding users to the group. So super, super basic stuff. It's probably Jira 100 level stuff here, but it's fundamentals, right? It's things that I literally almost do every single day as a Jira administrator. So I wanted to start off there because it's probably going to be a very common thing, right? Especially if you go work for a company that's just deploying Jira for the first time. You might all be onboarding a bunch of users. Um, maybe you're in this cleanup mode of Jira, right? And you're trying to cut costs because Atlassian themselves have recommended as we go into this price increase, if you want to kind of lower your price, your bill, they recommend go clean up your user list because some people don't clean them up. Some people have like external vendors that haven't accessed the system in 1 or 2 years, right? There's all kinds of people on there. So a common cleanup at least once a year is to go find those inactive users, remove their product access so you stop paying for the licenses. So I see that I got a couple people tuning into the live stream here. So welcome. If you want to use the chat, say hello, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. But if you have any questions at any point, I am monitoring the chat, so let me know. Drop in your questions. This topic today is all about Jira administration. And so I'm going to give you some of the skills, the traits, the techniques that you should know if you're wanting or curious or thinking about starting a career as a Jira administrator. All right, so we'll come back here. And so that was users. The other item in this window here that we're going to talk about are groups. So groups are very, very powerful. They're a gift and a curse, though. So they're a gift because from an administrative perspective, they really come in handy. They help you categorize your users. And we are going to be using groups a lot. I'm going to show you some techniques. And I have other videos where I talk about like permissions, roles, and authentication to projects. And having a user in a group is really, really key, right? One, you can ensure that like if you have a vendor, if you have like an external vendor, you can put all of those people inside of a specific like vendor group, and then only that group gets assigned access to a specific project, and you can kind of rest assured that that individual is not going to have access to all your Jira, right? But for that to work though, you always want to make sure that your Jira software users group doesn't include your vendors, right? Because if it does, then even if you put people in a group, and if your permission settings allow for basically anybody in the Jira software users group to have access to everything, then they're gonna have access to everything. So you do want to basically be careful here, and you want to make sure that when you're adding users to a group that they have product access, because if they don't, right? So if you see here where this Friday's class group, if it didn't have, see how it says no product access? This means that when I add a user to this group, only to the Friday's class group, and I don't put them in any other group, they will not have access to any Jira because they don't have product access, right? And so we can talk about that later. That is a bit more of an advanced topic here, but just know that when you're creating a group, you can kind of manage this here, right? So I can actually come in here to show details, and I can do an actions here, and I can manage my, oh boy, where is it? Well, I don't want to play with it here. There is a way for you to basically ensure that these groups that you create do have product access. I'll make a separate, like just a separate tutorial for this, because it is very important, right? Because when you create new groups, they won't always have product access. By default, they don't. And so if you're going to add somebody like a vendor, right? So if I can create like external vendor, and I just hit create, you'll see that this group, once it's created, and I go back to my groups, there's nothing, right? There's no product access. So you do want to fix this. You want to make sure that your vendor does have product access, only because now what I'm going to do is if I add another user, I'm not going to here, but when I add another user, I want to make sure that when I go to that user's group, that I remove any um, any group that has any group that is like the Jira software users group, because if they're in that basic common Jira software users group, they're going to have access to everything, and that is not good. You don't want them to be able to access all your stuff, because if they do, then it defeats the purpose of having it. So consult with me if you, this is I thought the titles was familiar. Matthew Door. Yeah. So um yeah, I was Googling for Matthew, who's on the talk here. I was Googling through Google Trends, right? So I was doing a tutorial. I was writing an article on how I monetize my YouTube channel, and I was just doing like Jira, and when I did, or how to use Jira, I believe is what I had put in here. Yeah, and so the topic of practical Jira administration came through. So that's where I got that inspiration. And then I Googled it, and then I realized I think it's a common term. And so hopefully I don't get into trouble for using it, but Google Trends was promoting practical Jira administration. So I decided to jump on that opportunity. Anyways, we'll come back to this topic of product access for now, but essentially you come and create your groups here. I recommend you create as many groups as you need to create to logically segregate and separate users, because if you have them all just like in one giant group, it's harder to manage access down the road. Another advantage of this is if your company does like bill back, right? So if you're charging somebody else for the licenses or different departments, then if you group them into different different groups, then you can bill appropriately, right? So there's a couple of reasons why you would want to explore groups. It's really powerful, but the disadvantage is groups are only viewable to the administrator like yourself. So your scrum masters, product owners, just users of Jira, they won't be able to see the group. They won't be able to see who's in the group. And so you lose a little bit of the value. Sorry, you lose a little bit of the value there. And so you just want to be very careful with communicating that to your users. All right, we're going to come over to products here and see if I can figure out how to add that how to add those groups, because here we go. So in this here, so I went to products, and then you come to manage access. And so when you add your group, you can add a group here. And so if I were to bring in my external vendor here, and I give them the role of like user, right, they'll be able to essentially now be able to use the group, or they'll have product access. So this is good. This basically means that if I invite a completely new user and I put them in this external vendor, I do not have to put them in the Jira software users group, which typically, again, by default is open to everybody, right? But if I put them in just in this external vendor, then that will consume a license. By putting them in here, these members of these groups will consume a license, and that is typically a really good thing if you want to kind of circumvent some of those external users. All right. So that was it on the directory. Another item that I want to look up here for you is you can actually update the URL. You're only allowed to change it 3 times, but this is not a common task, but this is just something that I wanted to throw out to Jira admins out there. If you ever are tasked with changing the URL for a Jira project, you're going to want to come in here to get that updated. And then the last thing, if you are on Jira Premium, I urge you, take advantage because you're paying for this, right? Create a sandbox. And this is really, really easy. You just click on this create sandbox. You're going to pick a product to make the sandbox off of. It's going to be only off of the premium versions of the products that you have. I only have Jira software. So I'm going to hit create. And when I do this, it's just going to go and create a sandbox for me. It takes a couple of minutes. It just depends on how much data you have and just how big your environment is, because you do have an option here to basically copy your production data. And this is really important. If you're not using a sandbox, I think this is probably one of the most underrated features of Jira, because as a Jira administrator, I don't like to mess. I don't like to learn in production. Nobody, if you've anybody has been in IT, you definitely know and will appreciate that production is not the place where you go and learn how to do things, right? Because you can have some very serious consequences if you do and mess something up in production. So if you're on Jira Premium, or if you're not on Jira Premium, you've been like, why should I go to Jira Premium? Being on Jira Premium gives you access to this sandbox, and you should absolutely create a sandbox so that you have a place that you can delete and recreate and delete and recreate, and you can go crazy and get messy and experiment and try things and change the workflows and delete stuff and do whatever you're going to do to learn, to let your curiosity take you places, and then kind of just rewash everything new, right? So if you're not using this sandbox, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you get this set up. And if you're not on premium, again, not sponsored by Atlassian, but highly recommend that you consider, maybe talk to your bosses, because if you've ever have ran to a situation where you've broken production Jira, think of the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of damages of potentially breaking your Jira, right? So spending a little bit extra per month to have access to a sandbox where maybe your new team members can join, or just whoever you're training to have a place to go and experiment, priceless in my opinion, right? And so all you got to do is, again, go to your products, go to sandbox, and then you can come over here, copy your production data. What this does is it will actually copy pretty much everything that you have in your local production instance into your sandbox. So all of the rules, sorry, not the rules, all of the workflows, all of those custom fields, everything kind of comes over. And so now you can go and experiment. I, however, like to just have a clean slate sandbox. So I'm just going to go and experiment over there. So it's kind of like having a new Jira. Again, it's only a premium version feature. So if you're not on Jira Premium, you're not going to have this advantage. But this sandbox has saved me a ton of time. Heck, in fact, if it wasn't for the sandbox, I probably wouldn't have become the Jira expert that I am today, because I can't tell you how many hours I spent just playing, trying things out in the sandbox, just trying to see if I can break things. Okay, so that's pretty much gonna do it here for the main section here. I don't need to really get into any of the other screens here, as you won't really need to go into them. So we're going to leave the overview, and we're just going to go back into Jira, and I'm going to continue going down the list of the gear. So coming back to our gear here on the right, I'm not going to touch billing, because unless you're like an org admin, you're really not usually responsible for the billing. But if you are, let me know, and I like in the comments or in the chat. We can definitely do like a more dedicated video. Billing is always kind of a sensitive topic though, because you're exposing credit card numbers, addresses, and stuff like that. So just let me know if you have questions over billing, but for the most part, I'm going to skip that and we're going to go straight down to system. Okay. So at the system level, there's a lot of automation, or sorry, not speaking correctly. There's a lot of configurations that you can do here. Okay. In this general configuration, one of the things that I would kind of want you to watch out for is changing your time zone. So most companies are global, but I've seen this is a common thing that I changed in here, where I go and configure the time zone just so that the times that you're seeing in Jira are at least relevant to something. So I would base this based on your company's headquarters time zone and do it that way. That way, whenever you're looking at those timestamps in Jira, they're a little bit more relevant for you. Other than that, I don't think that I've ever really messed with these settings all that much. So I am going to leave this alone, and I'm going to take you to the next place where I do some things. Now, there is an advanced settings here. I have actually changed something here. And the one thing that I've changed here, and this was just one time, was the clone prefix. So if you ever use the cloning feature, which means if you've ever gone into Jira, If only I could show you with an example, right? If you ever go into Jira and you open up an issue, any issue you want, and you just take advantage of the clone functionality, when you do this, it automatically appends the word clone. And so if you get a request, or if you've ever gotten annoyed by the fact that you have to come in here and delete this, and delete the words clone, that's because it's inheriting it from here. And so you can actually change this so it doesn't have anything, or so that it says something else, right? Aside from that, there's a couple of other things, like maybe your date formats. There's a couple of different things that I would recommend you not mess with too many things here, but just know that the clone one is one of those settings that I've actually come in here and actually configured. Aside from that, we'll come down to the audit log. This is actually not too helpful. If you're an enterprise, I believe enterprise subscribers of Jira Cloud only get like this very, very sophisticated log in the admin.atlassian.com. But this one's at least going to give you some information. It's not going to be very, very good. I personally don't like it. I've never really found anything useful here. But just know that certain big changes like workflow updates, statuses being created, workflows being created, users being added, big ticket items like that, they are being tracked. And so you can come in here and take a look at your log. You can export it and basically take a snoop around. And this is really popular or common of like somebody broke your Jira. If you have multiple admins and you're trying to figure out, well, who done it, come into your audit log and check and see if you can figure out who done it. Upside from that, we got project roles. And so this one's really helpful. This one's actually a good one. I recommend, I have a video where I've done this in more detail, but project roles, aside from the users and the groups that we created at the beginning of this training here, your project roles is something you should visit and put some thought into it. I personally recommend that you have the 3 roles of administrator, who has read, write, delete, developer, who has read and write, and then user, who just has read. Now, I do have specific videos where I go into more detail in all these things, but at the very minimum, you shouldn't just have administrators. Administrators is the default role that comes with Jira, and that basically gives everybody access to everything. And you don't typically want to do that. So as an admin, at least upon the beginning when you're standing Jira up, it's a good practice to come in and create an extra couple of roles, because it will really significantly help kind of separate the roles and responsibilities of your users, right? Because you don't want every user to be a chef in a kitchen. Trust me, give everybody a knife. You're asking for nothing but a horror movie or really, really bad news. And so you don't want that. You want to make sure you add a couple more roles. This is also a good place for maybe you to add a role for external users as well, in case you didn't like my group recommendation earlier. But doing the roles is going to be a pretty important thing. And so I recommend, at a minimum, if I was you, I always have a read, write, delete, which is my administrator, my read, write, which is my developers, and then my read, which are my users. And I just want to take a time here to say hello to Audrey. Thank you so much for tuning in, Audrey. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being here. And the pleasure's all mine, Audrey. Trust me. All right. So that's it with the roles. We will talk a little bit about roles a little bit later. But if you're just kind of anxious to figure out how the users, the groups, and the roles all come together, I do have a couple of videos. I'll try to link them. I usually forget to link, but go and look up in one of my videos. It's one of my newer recent videos within the last month or so. I do explain what's the difference between users, groups, roles, and I do basically coach you through how to configure your users. So if it's a little bit confusing, go check out. There's like 3 or 4 videos on that. And so yeah. So I have to take a test on this tomorrow, and these informations are helpful. Let me know if there's any specific questions, Audrey, you want me to help answer. I can show you some examples. I have a script here, but if there's anything that you're kind of nervous or you're not 100% sure on, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to see if I can answer it on the live stream here. All right, so project roles, leaving that, we're going to go to global permissions. These are kind of important too. One of the biggest ones is this company managed projects. Automatically, this is open to pretty much everybody on the internet, although I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but at the very minimum, if you see yourself, if you're a new Jira admin, maybe you just got the job and you're perusing through your new company's Jira, and you notice that they have a lot of team managed projects. You want to come in here and change the setting, because having too many team managed projects can be a bad thing. It's not always a good thing, right? And you can really organizations can really be hurt because there's no standardization. When you're using a tool like Jira, you don't want it to be wild, wild west. You don't want everybody to just be able to do anything that they want. You want to put a little bit of structure in organization to Jira. And I recommend disabling this create team managed projects, at least for everybody, because it's open for everybody. And you should restrict it to maybe just your administrators, or trusted personnel, right? I'm not saying eliminate them completely, even though I personally hate team managed projects, but you should at least manage it so it's not open to everybody, because this is a surefire way to basically have like hundreds and hundreds of Jira projects that are like, I've seen projects that are like one project per sprint, which is a big no-no. I've seen one project per release, which is a big no-no, right? And so you just, when users aren't guided because they just don't know any better, because also the tool lets them do it, they will get into trouble. So if you're seeing that kind of phenomenon, that kind of behavior, recommend you come in here and kill this part off so that users can't do it. Aside from that, another interesting one for you to be aware of is the share dashboards and filters. So if your users can't share a dashboard and filter, or if they can't browse the users, which basically means they can't tag people, they can't assign people, right? Like the names won't show up. That is a direct correlation. You want to come and look at these two permissions here. Now, bonus points to see if anybody was paying attention. If you remember a few minutes ago, I created a group called external vendor, right? And I added that external vendor to the product access, which basically means as soon as I invite a vendor to my Jira, I can put them in that group. I'm automatically going to pay for their license, and they're going to be able to access Jira. But a common scenario, a common problem that I get as a Jira admin is, okay, so I put these people in this group. They should have access. I did the roles, I did the permissions, I did the people, the permission scheme, everything's checked out, but they can't assign anybody. Like, what is going on? Well, if you come over here, you'll notice that something's missing. If you remember, I intentionally made the comment that when you are dealing with external vendors, it is imperative that you do not put them in the Jira users group, because that usually will give them access to everything, right? And so if you follow my advice and you don't put them in that group, then you're going to kind of shoot yourself in the foot a little bit, because now they're not going to be able to browse users and groups or share dashboards and filters. But that's okay, because all you got to do is come into your global permission. You come down here and you go to like browse users and groups, and then we select our external vendor. Oops, I think this is case sensitive. So once it's case sensitive. So once you select that, then I can add them. And now all of a sudden your users are going to be able to search for others, right? So this is a little gotcha that typically comes and bites people in the butt. It's a kind of a hard one to figure out unless you've, again, got some experience and you've done this before. But just know that this is a pretty good one to go and watch out for, because even if you double check your permissions and there is a permission for like assign user and it's assignable, unless they're in a group that is in this list here, they're not going to be able to search for people. All right, going down the list, I'm only going to cover a couple more things in this section because, to be honest, even as a Jira admin, and I'm a very power hungry Jira admin, I don't spend a whole lot of time in this global permission section. It's mainly a couple things. I'm literally highlighting the things that I'm an admin for like 12, 14 hours a day. These are the common things that I'm doing. So the probability that you're going to do something outside the stuff that I'm talking about, pretty low, just because, again, I have a pretty good feeling that the things that I'm telling you are just common occurrences, right? I get hundreds and hundreds of requests a day, and these are like the common things that are just like, they're always popping up, right? So trying to save you some time and money. Audrey, you are nervous about everything. Don't be nervous. Everything is hard until it's not. And I recommend just roll up your sleeves, jump into Jira, try things out. The worst that will happen is you break your Jira and you just go buy and sign up for a new one. Having a sandbox, I don't know if you missed my part about talking about the sandbox, but having a sandbox really, really does help with kind of just learning how to use Jira a bit. Issue collectors, I'll only mention briefly because I'm not a big fan of issue collectors, but if you're ever in a situation where you're trying to like embed Jira to like an external website and you want users to like submit tickets without, right, without a Jira account or creating an account, the issue collectors route is the way you're going to want to go. And let me know, comment section, chat, if there's any interest in this. This is one of those like features, a little bit more of an outlier, not something that I use in my 6-7 years of using Jira. I've only ever had one team ever use issue collectors, and that was like 8 or 9 months ago, right? And so that's the only reason I bring it up. Global automation. This is its own training on of itself. I did basically talk to you about automation. We've done a live stream on automation. This can be like an 8-hour thing by itself. So if there's any interest there, let me know. I'd be more than happy. I'm working on putting some courses together, and 2023 is definitely going to be when we're talking about some global automation. So you should be essentially be very comfortable with automation rules. So Audrey's asking, how was your Jira project cert exam? Was it hard? So I'm not gonna lie, Audrey, but I don't have any Jira certifications. I don't test well. I took all the classes. I had some about a year ago. No, March of this year. Yeah, so like January, February of this year, I took all the classes through like Atlassian's school. And then I took the practice exams. And it's not that they're hard, it's that they ask you, they don't ask you questions, like they're not black and white. They're not like, hey, how do you add a user to Jira? Right? Like that's not the question. The question that I saw was, you're onboarding a whole new group. You want to make sure that you have an external vendor and you don't want them to access your Jira, right? You don't want them to access all of Jira. You want them to access a very specific Jira project. What do you do? And then you have like a multiple choice, so you select what you do from there. So from that perspective, it's very tricky because it's not enough to know the skill of like, hey, this is how I add a user to a group, or this is how I add the group to the permission scheme. It's a trick of like, well, how do I solve the business problem using my Jira admin skills? And I think that's what makes the exam hard. But as long as you're really comfortable with Jira, and I think I do a pretty good job at maybe teaching you some of these, like why these things are important, right? Because there's always a business case to it, right? And so as long as you can kind of get yourself familiar and get exposed to how you solve these business problems, the test shouldn't be too hard. My other recommendation is if you can get yourself some practice questions, try them out, because it's a little bit different of a mindset shift, right? You literally, the question's not going to be how do you add a user to a group, right? Like that's not going to be a question, but a scenario where you have to add a user to a group, that's going to be the question, right? So you just want to be very comfortable with like how you apply the skill, not necessarily how to do the skill. So hopefully that helps. All right. So coming down the list here, announcement banner. I've used this a couple of times where if I'm gonna bring Jira, well, I don't bring this Jira down, right? But recently I did like an update to the authentication, right? So if I'm gonna do some changes to Jira, or maybe I'm gonna delete team managed projects, right? Or anytime that there's like a big thing happening, I can do an announcement banner, which basically shows it, basically to the people that you allow, right? So you can show it to the users, and they'll be able to see this message of whatever system-wide changes you want to show. Now from there, backup manager, this I've used quite a bit. So I don't know if you know this, but you can actually back up your cloud. And so this is really, really helpful. As a Jira administrator, I do a backup for the cloud every time that I'm going to do something major. So anytime where I'm moving data, anytime where I'm like, I know that I'm going to do something pretty drastic, right? Where I'm going to delete something, or I'm going to disable some functionality, I like to take a backup. Now you are presented with two options. You can either backup for the cloud or backup for the server. Make no mistake, if you're in the cloud, you're going to back up for the cloud. The files are constructed in a very different manner. So you want to make sure you pick the right one. Because if you don't pick the right one, your backup will not work. So anytime that you're doing work on the cloud, if you're doing like a cloud to cloud migration, maybe you're merging companies, maybe you're merging Jira instances, backup for the cloud is going to be where you're at. If you are, I've done a scenario maybe 1 or 2 years ago where I had a client who was on the cloud but needed to go to another cloud, which typically cloud to cloud will work, except they wanted to change all the emails of every user. If you remember from like 40 minutes ago, I mentioned when you're in the cloud, you really can't update the um, you really can't update the emails of your users, right? The onus is on them because this is their identity, this is their ID from Atlassian, and so one of the things that we had to do was we had to go from the cloud to the server, and then from the server back to a different cloud. And so it's like this little V shape, right? And so in that particular case, I backed it up for the server, right? I did this thing where I didn't back up to the cloud. I backed up to the server because my destination was to recreate the Jira on the server so that I can update all the emails and then um, and then send it over to the other cloud. So Bill, just joined. Coincidentally, you passed the ACP 100. Anything you want to share with us? Was it hard? What did you think? Any tips that you want to give us for how to prepare? What are some of the things that you did to get ready for this exam? It looks like Audrey's going to be taking the exam here tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And I personally never just done it, right? So I'm not a big fan of paper tigers. As you can see, I know my stuff. I probably could pass the ACPs if I wanted to go do it. But man, when I did the certified scrum master, which is a really easy test, and I got like a 97% on it. But holy moly, was I a nervous wreck, right? I was like second guessing myself. And so even though I know the material really, really well, I just test so poorly, right? And so this is why I like, you know what? I like to tell clients. So I had a client ask me one time about a year ago, they're like, hey, why would I hire you if you don't have any certifications? And my answer to them was, nothing on that exam is going to help me solve your problems. And so they really, really liked that answer. And they went with me, even though there was another person they were interviewing that did have all the certifications. So at the end of the day, if you don't have experience, if you don't have like the repertoire, like the one that I have, right? The ACPs, the certifications help you a lot. Certifications go a long way with like trying to get you new jobs, right? But once you actually know your stuff, there's no paper on earth that will like validate your information. So that's kind of like my thoughts, right? So I used to, when I was younger, I used to have a ton of certifications. I used to have Security Plus, certified ethical hacker, a lot of cybersecurity stuff. I just don't believe in them anymore. I never once used my certifications in cybersecurity, even though I was in that domain for a lot of my career. And so now that I'm in Jira, I focus on knowing Jira. I focus on knowing how to fix people's problems with Jira, and that's really all I care about. So that's my little TED talk for the day on my thoughts on certifications. But Bill says an unusual large number of questions about public versus private settings. That's interesting. Care to give us an example or something? Any, anything that you can actually share? I don't know what rules there are, but love to. Let's keep the conversation. If you guys have questions about the certification, a lot of questions about setting fixed version permissions. I don't even know what the heck that means. Setting fixed version permissions. You sure? Well, we can do that? Oh man, maybe I should go and look through the. That's what I should do. I should live stream myself trying to take the ACP, and you guys can all watch me fail, right? Anyways, so that's the backup. Again, I typically do this just as a CYA. It's a cover your behind, and so if anything ever goes south, you're gonna want to make sure you have a backup so that you can make sure you can always restore back, right? And so that's that one. The external system import. This right here. This right here is the worst thing about being a Jira administrator. I hate doing imports. I'll do them. I know how to do them well. I've done hundreds of them, but every time, it usually takes me 3 times to get it just right. Doing imports in Jira, and if you're an aspiring Scrum Jira administrator, learn this. This is a very painful thing to get right. It's not painful with respect to like it's very trivial. It's really easy, right? You come in here, you basically pick a file. So you pick a CSV file. I don't know if I have any, right? I'll just do this one right here, right? You do that, and then you leave the defaults here. You click on next, and then once you're there, you're gonna select the project that's gonna get it. The suffix for the users. Somebody help me. I gotta figure it out one day, right? But there's a way for you to like add your users and preserve the user so that they actually get assigned to the ticket and to the reporter. Never been able to figure this out. The date time format, this kicked my butt for a long time until I finally figured it out. This format right here, month. Oops, let me get month, day, year. This right here is usually the way I do it. So this basically represents something like 08, 10 to 2022. So this is the format that I like to import my dates in from Jira or when I'm doing a CSV import. And so that's what I try to basically keep. This has worked for me really, really well. I have found great success. I've tried a ton of different formats, but the big M, day, little d's, and then 4 Y's, which basically equals that the the string over here on the right. This is the one that's been the most effective for me when importing a project. And so once you have that, once you have like the some of these settings configured, then you just click next. Then you just got to map the field. So basically every column in your CSV file, you need to basically map it to this to this section here. So once you do that, once you map it to the field, so you know you have the column to the Jira field, then you just import and the data comes in, right? But the data is always kind of like screwed up somehow, some way, and it does take you some practice to like figure out how in the CSV. I can do a whole class. I don't want to bore you guys with all these details, but master the CSV import because this is something that I do at least once, twice, if not like 3 times a week, and it's just a pain in the butt until you get this correct. So I'm gonna go back to Bill here. So took it twice. You'll find and get a random questions. The permissions you need to add new fixed versions. Oh, yeah. So you need to be a project admin to be able to create the permission, but then anybody should be able to utilize the fixed version once the version is actually created. A few questions about CSV imports, like know if you need a trailing comma in your CSV. No questions about the date time, but in real life, this is brutal. Yeah. I can imagine it's a hard test. Again, it's not so much that you don't have the skills. It's like how do you interpret the question to the skill that you have? That I find to be the tricky part. All right, so we're wrapping this up here. Migrate cloud site. So if you've ever done like a cloud to cloud migration, this is where you're going to be at. This if you're on the data center or if you're on premise and you're trying to migrate to the cloud, pretty much a similar interface, but you're going to have a Jira Cloud to or Jira Migration Assistant or something like that. But it's basically the same thing here. The last thing that I want to talk about here in this section is send email. And so the send email section, this is powerful. So if you ever need to blast an email to like all your Jira users, you can actually come in here, go to groups, find that group that has pretty much all your Jira users, like this one. You can also hold control and like pick a couple of them. Oops, I'm on the Mac, right? So you can do this or you can send it to a couple people, but you can basically pick the group with the largest amount of people, whoever you're trying to communicate to, and basically like fill it out. And then this is going to send a mass email to a ton of people. It's kind of a powerful thing. I use it a little bit more effective because it's the banner is like passive aggressive, right? It's like a banner pops up, people can get notified. But this is aggressive, right? This is everybody's gonna get an email with whatever information I'm trying to convey. So, anyways, I think I got everything that I wanted to cover in this section. Any questions? And Bill, thank you so much for sharing with us. Again, I've never taken the test. I've only done like the practice tests. That scared me enough to know that I never want to take the test. And I've had a pretty successful career without the certifications. But again, I have 6 years of experience. I have a YouTube channel. Anytime that anybody asks me, like, hey, do you actually know your Jira? I send them right back to my YouTube channel. And this is like my personal resume, if you will, right? So it's not something that I'm actively pursuing, but I know there's a lot of interest in getting certifications, especially when you're new to the community. So I recommend you go and try it out. I don't think they're that expensive, but definitely if Jira administration is something you want to do, I definitely recommend you investigate a little bit more and invest some energy. All right. Next up, so that was the settings. I got about 10 minutes and we still got 3 more sections that I want to cover. So, and we're definitely going to overflow into a part 2. But let's jump into products and talk about the product section a little bit in detail here. So the Jira software configuration, this is something I want you to be aware of. Parallel sprints for company managed projects. I'm going to pause here for a second. So if you want headaches and if you want your teams to really make a lot of honest mistakes, turn this feature on. If you don't, if you don't want headaches as a Jira administrator, turn this feature off. Parallel sprints, I don't know why Jira does this. A best practice, and I will stand firmly with this, a best practice is one board, one sprint. Okay. If a team is like, well, I have 2 or 3 teams we're managing out of the same backlog, I call them out on that all the time because there's no 2 or 3 teams that are sharing this backlog. That just doesn't happen, right? They they most likely work collaboratively, but they have dependencies on each other, but everybody's kind of doing their own unique thing. In that case, I recommend each team get their own board with their own backlog, with their own sprint, still within the same Jira project, but individually managed. I would refrain from turning this feature on because this basically means that I can come over to my Jira. If I turned it on, I can come over to my Jira. I can create these 2 sprints that I have here, and I can start sprint on another sprint. And again, so now I'm running 2 sprints. And so again, common scenario why people like this is because I'm managing 2 different teams that are sharing the same backlog, but that's dangerous. You don't want your teams to be in that kind of a situation. The other scenario that I get is, well, I just want to, there's like an overlap, right? There's like one sprint is still going, and I want the team to kick off the next one, right? Maybe they're on different cadences. Again, have the other team be on a different board with their own sprint, with their own cadence. You do have the option over here to create more boards, right? This one has FJC and it has Scrum Team B. And you can do this as long as you change your filter settings so that the issues are routed to one board or the other. There's fields that you can use for this, right? Any field will help you kind of do this little traffic cop thing for your tickets so that they end up on the right board. But having 2 or more teams work out of the same backlog, work out of the same board on different cadences with different priorities, that is just a recipe for no-nos. And so again, this is one of those situations where Jira lets you do it, but should you do it? It's not always a good thing, right? And so I recommend you leave this feature off, but buyer beware if you turn it on. Bill says that he's been going at this since 2015. So Bill, you got me beat by about a year. I started Jira Halloween of 2016. And so I've been using it pretty much 9 to 5 every day since Halloween of 2016. So been there a little bit longer than me, but glad you were able to share your experience here with the ACP 100. Maybe one day I'll take it again just for the heck of it to see if I can do it. I also don't know if I want to waste, what is it, like $200-$300 for the exam? I don't know that I want to necessarily throw $300 in the trash, but we'll see. We'll have to try it out one day. Other settings here we have. So this is a premium only feature. So if you're on Jira Premium, you're gonna be able to control the permissions for your advanced roadmaps. So very similar to those global permissions that we looked at earlier. You have the ability to control who can create, view, and edit your plans. This is probably one of the big settings here that you want to make sure you add, like your user group, right? You want to make sure that all your users should be able to see and use the plans because they're very powerful things. If you're paying for Jira Premium, this is probably other than the sandbox, this is my next favorite feature. So you should absolutely let as many people use it. From an administrator perspective, though, you definitely can restrict just for like site admins who can administer the roadmaps of your Jira projects, right? So there's also just, if you just want to give them read only, maybe give this one to your users, and then so tweak this as you need to, but make sure that I recommend that at least at a minimum from the viewer perspective, have as many people be able to see these plans because there's a wealth of insight and knowledge inside these advanced roadmaps. And there's a reason why you're doubling your Atlassian bill to be able to do this. This setting here is actually moving. So as you saw, we left where we were. So this feature has moved. So this is a Jira Premium thing as well. It's $250 for the exam. So yeah, so I don't know that I want to spend throw $250 in the trash. So yeah, just know that your hierarchy configuration is changing. It should be changed in your Jira already, but it is now at the global level. And last two things, I'll talk about application links. So these are another common thing. These are more of these like little outliers. I want to say common, but it's more of an outlier. Every once in a while, I'm asked to like integrate with some other app that isn't in the marketplace. And so that you can actually like use Jira's APIs, and you can build these custom applications. Or some applications just don't want to go to the marketplace, and so they just rely on these application links. So these are really finicky is the right word, but you can just get the documentation for whatever application you're trying to integrate should contain this information. So it's not like something you have to go figure it out. But this is kind of where you come in and basically like add like direct links between an external application and your Jira. But I want you to be very careful though when you're adding these, because from a cybersecurity security perspective, this is an exposure, right? You can expose yourself here by connecting to an unsanctioned application. The applications that are through the marketplace, they usually get vetted a little bit more, right? And so I caution you, but I've done enough of these to know that this is something you want to know and be aware of, because I've done like maybe a dozen or so application links over my lifetime. And then the DVCS, I don't know what the heck DVCS stands for, but this is how you connect to your Git. Specifically, this is how you connect to either Bitbucket Cloud or to GitHub Enterprise. If you just have regular GitHub without the Enterprise, you see how you're trying to connect to just GitHub.com. There's actually a marketplace app that you have to install, and you would go that route, so you would not be here. But if you are in the using Bitbucket, you're going to want to link it here. I am planning on over the next few weeks plan on talking a little bit more about like Bitbucket and Git and just how all this stuff works from like a DevOps perspective. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you drop a like on these videos so you can be notified when all this stuff happens. But this is coming in the future. And so that's the last thing here. We only have a couple minutes left. And so I'm going to just maybe open it up for some questions, and maybe give you a tease of what's coming up next. So we'll pick this up again next week, but we are going to talk about projects. Projects there's a couple of things to discuss here with respect to pretty much all these categories here. But then the issues. This is probably where 90% of my Jira administration actually comes through. Now, there's a I'm in a double like I'm stuck in a fork in the road here, right? Because a lot of these settings I've already done in-depth videos, so I was just gonna kind of briefly touch on them. So I'm not sure if there's any merit in doing it, but there's a couple things that I haven't touched yet. But like workflows, I have a deep dive on workflows. We've done a live stream on workflows. We've done a deep dive where it's just the condensed version of that. Same thing with screens. Same thing with field configurations. But there's a couple of other things that we haven't talked about, like custom fields, these statuses, resolutions, priorities, permission schemes, and so there might be a little bit of some warrant to basically walk you through some of the tips and tricks here. And so we'll definitely delay that for another version for another day. I just don't want to I don't want to like rush it, right? Because we are at the top of the hour here, and then we're going to talk about apps. So these are the last like 3 sections that I want to make sure we dedicate another hour to, and give you all the tools you need to succeed. So with that said, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. To the loyal people that are still tuning in, at the end, I like to close out my live streams by basically sharing with you the progress of how the YouTube channel is going, what am I working on, and how you can like get connected and talk a little bit more with me during non live stream hours, right? So one of the things, if you remember from last week, I have a link tree, which I think let me go to my link tree here. Let me see if I can find it. You know what's on my LinkedIn? So if I go to my LinkedIn, I will go to my link tree under my profile and then create this one. So here's my link tree. And so if you come in here, you'll be able to see the blog. I got a TikTok, Twitter, and a LinkedIn. On the TikTok, I finally figured out what I'm doing with vertical videos. So very excited to be sharing what's coming up next, but I'm hoping to get more eyeballs on just my YouTube content, and TikTok's going to play a big role in that. I also have a pretty good blog post that I just published last Saturday, which is how I started and monetized a YouTube channel in 9 months. So if you're curious about how I did it, recommend you go check it out. I know it's behind the paywall, but you do get 3 free articles a month, and I do plan on publishing 4 a month, so you should be able to get most of my articles for free. But if you can follow me on there, that'd be really great. And then just take a look at this one. If you've ever like aspired or you've been thinking about starting a YouTube channel, specifically like technical, I give you pretty much the playbook on how I did it. So recommend you go check me out there. And then now let's go jump into YouTube and kind of give you some stats, because I don't know. I think last Tuesday when I did my last live stream, we had just monetized, right? So things have changed. We're at 16 subscribers, and you'll notice, I'm going to go to my analytics here, that we're making money. We've made $69. So I'm averaging about like $10 a day. Obviously the weekends are really bad, but we're averaging about $10 a day, which is really good. It's an extra about $300 a month here. So healthy amount. And again, I couldn't have done any of this without you guys. So appreciate you all, everybody that has subscribed, everybody that watches the videos, everybody that shares the videos. Just thank you so much. But this is essentially what happens when you put the effort that I'm doing, right? So if you've been curious of like, how much money can I make, right? Can you get to like Mr. Beast levels numbers, right? No, Bill. You comment as much as you want. Bill, you are more than welcome to comment anytime, every time that you want. But yeah. So anyway, so these are some of the numbers. So obviously not gonna get rich off of this YouTube channel anytime soon. But in case you were curious, like, what do these videos make? Like, is it worth it? Like, is it something you want to get into? I predict about $300 a month, which is maybe takes care of my food, right? So at least I can feed the family off of YouTube. But hopefully, eventually, we will we'll get a little closer, right? These numbers will just go up from here, right? The more effort, the more videos, the more community engagement that we had, the obviously the better that we favor the algorithm, the almighty algorithm. So this should improve over time. And obviously, I have a week, right? Like, let's talk again in 6 months, in a year, 2 years, and see where we're at. But I just wanted to share the journey with you all. So 16 subscribers. The current goal is hit 2,000 by Halloween. So I got about, I don't know, 5-6 weeks to do that. And so hopefully we get to those numbers then. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm rambling at this point. Appreciate you all. If you haven't dropped a like, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you smash the subscribe button. Go look at all the videos. If you see anything that's useful that your coworkers or anybody else can benefit from, please make sure you share with them. Appreciate you all helping me spread the good word. And I will see you all next week. Thanks. Bye.
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up just so they could see me. Did what I had to do just to feed me. And what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Take into your hands a plan. Your own hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the hours it takes to get some power. Don't be f***ing sour. Take a cold shower. Scream until you're louder. Work until you're prouder. And f*** all the doubters, they're just your downers. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm off at these fucking clowns who were all taught they deserve an ounce. It's only worth it if you work for it. It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown. I'm just telling you to fight for your dreams, but it's not what it seems. Man, it's hard to be seen when everybody wants to be king. Yeah, they all wanna ring, yeah, we all wanna be free. So show me what you got, what you bring, how you fight in the ring, how you take a fucking swing. Do you got heart, are you mean? Got some scars, got some needs, are you willing to go bleed? I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm off at these fucking clowns who were all taught they deserve an ounce. It's only worth it if you work for it. It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. stop till I wear the crown. I